What had appeared to be empty space around his fleet suddenly blazed with electromagnetic signatures as hidden installations revealed themselves throughout the system. "Report!" Crexville barked, his three hearts racing as tactical displays updated with impossible speed. "Battle Marshal, we're detecting artificial gravity wells forming around the fleet perimeter. The humans have deployed some kind of gravitational manipulation network." His sensor operator's voice cracked with disbelief. The energy requirements alone should be beyond their capabilities. Admiral Chen's image remained on the main display, her expression calm as chaos erupted around the Confederation fleet. "You see, Battle Marshal, while you were cataloging our orbital platforms and counting our missile batteries, you missed the real weapons. Humans have always preferred to let our enemies defeat themselves." Crexville watched in growing horror as his formation began to distort. The artificial gravity wells weren't attacking his ships directly. They were hurting them, compressing the fleet into an increasingly tight formation, while simultaneously preventing any vessel from jumping to hyperspace. "Evasive maneuvers. All ships break formation and—" His orders died in his throat as the true scope of the trap became clear. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt, installations that had masqueraded as mining operations or research stations began moving. Not powering up weapons or raising shields, but physically relocating. The humans had somehow learned to move entire facilities through space with a precision that spoke of technology far beyond what their initial scans had suggested. "Admiral," Crexville said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "What are you doing?" "What humans have always done when something bigger than us shows up uninvited," Chen replied. "We're about to show you why evolution favored the clever over the strong." The moving installations weren't weapons platforms, they were components of something larger. As Crexville watched, dozens of seemingly separate structures began connecting, forming a vast network that surrounded his fleet on all sides. It was like watching a spiderweb materialize around trapped prey. "Battle Marshal, whatever they're building, it's generating massive amounts of exotic matter. Our physicists are detecting controlled micro-wormholes throughout the structure." The science officer's report carried undertones of professional amazement mixed with terror. "This level of spatial manipulation shouldn't be possible with their technology base. Unless their technology base was never what we thought it was," Admiral Chen said, apparently monitoring their communications. "You assumed primitive meant stupid, Battle Marshal. That was your first mistake." Crexville activated fleet-wide communications. "All ships, focus fire on the nearest installation nodes. We break their weapon before they can activate it." 200 of the galaxy's most advanced warships opened fire simultaneously, directing enough energy to vaporize small moons at the human construction. Plasma beams, antimatter torpedoes, and exotic particle streams converged on the nearest installation. The weapons passed harmlessly through their targets as if firing at ghosts. "Holographic projections," breathed the tactical officer. "The installations we're targeting aren't there." "No," Admiral Chen corrected. "They're there. They're just not when you think they are. Up." The impossible nature of the statement hung in the air for a moment before the full implications hit Crexville like a physical blow. "Temporal displacement?" "Temporal displacement," Chen confirmed. "Each installation exists approximately 0.3 seconds ahead of local space-time. Your weapons can't touch what hasn't happened yet." The Battle Marshal's mind reeled. Temporal manipulation was theoretical even for the most advanced Confederation scientists. The energy requirements and technological sophistication needed to displace matter through time were beyond anything his species had achieved. "How?" he demanded. "Your civilization barely mastered fusion power." "You keep making the same mistake," Admiral Chen replied, her tone carrying a hint of pity. "You think technology follows a linear path, chemical rockets, then fusion, then antimatter, then whatever comes next. But humans never learned to think linearly. We've had theoretical frameworks for temporal mechanics since the 20th century. We've understood the mathematical principles of artificial gravity manipulation since the early 21st. We just lacked the computational power and exotic matter production capabilities to implement them. Once we solved those problems, everything else was just engineering." As if to emphasize her point, the installations completed their connection. The web of structures surrounding the fleet activated, and space itself began to behave strangely. Stars visible through the network appeared to bend and twist, their light following impossible paths as the human's trap reached full power. "All ships report status," Crexville ordered, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Hyperspace drives are completely offline, Battle Marshal. The spatial distortions are preventing fault space access. Sublight engines are functional, but we're encountering massive gravitic interference. Acceleration reduced to 12% of normal capacity. Communications with Confederation Command are being disrupted. Something is interfering with our quantum entanglement arrays. Krexvol stared at the tactical display, watching his invincible fleet trapped like insects in amber. In 3 centuries of military service, he had never encountered a species capable of such sophisticated strategic thinking. The humans hadn't built weapons to destroy his ships. They had built a cage to capture them. "What do you want?" he asked Admiral Chen, the words tasting like defeat in his mouth. "We want you to leave," she replied simply. "All of you. Go back to your confederation and tell them that Earth is not interested in their empire. And if we refuse?" Admiral Chen's expression grew cold, and for the first time, Krexvol saw the predator that lurked beneath humanity's civilized exterior. "Then you'll discover why we call this the mouse hole." Before Krexvol could ask what she meant, his sensors detected new movement throughout the system. What had appeared to be small human spacecraft, barely worth noting in his tactical assessment, were moving with purpose. Hundreds of them, converging on his trapped fleet from multiple directions. "Battle Marshal, those aren't cargo haulers," his sensor operator reported. "Each vessel is reading as pure exotic matter. They're not ships at all. They're controlled singularities." The implications hit Krexvol like antimatter detonation. Hundreds of artificial black holes, each one carefully controlled and directed, were approaching his fleet. Not to destroy his ships, that would be wasteful. Instead, they were moving into precise positions around each vessel, ready to compress his mighty warships into infinitely dense points of matter. "You would destroy us?" he asked, though he already knew the answer wouldn't be that simple. "Destroy you, Battle Marshal, destruction is wasteful. We prefer recycling." Admiral Chen touched something off camera, and Krexvil's ship shuddered as something made contact with the hull. Not weapons fire or collision, but something far more disturbing. The sensation of his vessel being analyzed, catalogued, and understood at a molecular level. Every ship in your fleet represents thousands of years of technological development. Advanced metallurgy, exotic matter processing, artificial intelligence systems, faster-than-light communication arrays. You brought us the greatest collection of advanced technology humanity has ever encountered, and you delivered it right into our hands. The horrifying realization dawned on Krexvol as his ship's systems began reporting cascading failures. The humans weren't attacking his fleet's weapons or engines. They were systematically copying every advanced system his ships contained, while simultaneously implementing selective shutdowns. "You're stealing our technology," he said, amazement overriding his fear. "We prefer the term aggressive reverse engineering," Admiral Chen corrected. "Human civilization has always been built on our ability to take what we need from whoever has it. Your arrival just represents the greatest procurement opportunity in our history." Krexvol watched helplessly as his fleet's most classified systems were laid bare before human analysis. Weapons that required centuries to develop, shielding systems that represented the pinnacle of Confederation science, communication networks that spanned thousands of light years, all of it flowing into human databases with terrifying efficiency. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked, though he suspected he might not want to know the answer. "Since about 30 seconds after your scout ship left our system," Admiral Chen replied. "We've had 18 standard time units to prepare. That's long enough for humans to accomplish quite a lot when we're properly motivated." The scope of humanity's achievement began to dawn on Krexvol. In less than 2 standard years, they had not only developed technology that surpassed Confederation capabilities in key areas, but they had also constructed a system-wide trap sophisticated enough to capture an entire battle fleet. The level of coordination, industrial capacity, and scientific advancement required for such a feat should have taken centuries. "Your species developed all of this in 18 time units? Battle Marshal, you really don't understand humans yet. We're the species that went from first flight to walking on our moon in 66 years. From basic computers to global information networks in 50 years. From splitting the atom to fusion power in 30 years. When humans decide something needs to be done, time becomes just another obstacle to overcome. And when someone threatens our home, we stop worrying about what should be possible and focus on what needs to be possible." Krexvol's tactical officer approached his command station, moving with the careful deliberation of someone delivering terrible news. "Battle Marshal, they've gained complete access to our computer systems. Not just surface data, everything. Fleet positions, Confederation military capabilities, star charts, diplomatic protocols, economic systems. They know more about our civilization now than most of our own citizens." The full magnitude of the disaster began to sink in. His fleet hadn't just been captured, it had been completely compromised. Every secret the Confederation possessed, every advantage their civilization held, now resided in human databases. Admiral Chen, Krexeville said, his voice barely above a whisper. What happens now? Now? Admiral Chen stood up, and for the first time during their conversation, Krexeville could see her full command center. Banks of displays showed real-time analysis of his fleet, detailed breakdowns of Confederation technology, and what appeared to be construction schematics for ships that didn't match any human design he'd seen. Now, Battle Marshal, you're going to deliver a message to your Confederation. You're going to tell them that Earth has reviewed their offer of integration and found it lacking. You're going to explain that humanity has different plans for our future in the galaxy. And you're going to warn them that the next time they send ships into our space, those ships won't be going home. As if to emphasize her point, the controlled singularities around his fleet began to pulse in perfect synchronization. Each pulse sent gravitational waves through his ships, a demonstration of the power humanity now held over his forces. You're releasing us? Krexville asked, surprised. We're releasing you, Admiral Chen confirmed. Minus your weapons, your faster-than-light communication systems, your hyperspace navigation computers, and about 90% of your fuel reserves. You'll have enough power to reach the nearest Confederation outpost, but it's going to be a very long, very uncomfortable journey. Krexville felt his ships lurching as human technology systematically disabled or removed everything that could pose a threat. In minutes, the most powerful fleet in galactic history had been reduced to barely functional hulks capable of little more than basic life support and minimal propulsion. Why? He asked. Why not simply destroy us? Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly, showing a glimpse of the compassion that existed alongside humanity's predatory nature. Because, Battle Marshal, we're not monsters. We're just very, very good at protecting what's ours. Your people sent you here to conquer us, but that doesn't mean you deserve to die for their mistake. Besides, someone needs to carry our message back to your Confederation. Someone needs to explain what they're really dealing with when they look toward Earth. The spatial distortions holding his fleet began to dissipate, and Krexville felt the subtle shift as normal spacetime reasserted itself around his ships. The human installations were powering down, fading back into apparent invisibility as they returned to their disguised forms. Your technology, he said, still struggling to comprehend what he'd witnessed. It's decades ahead of anything we possess in key areas. How did you develop it so quickly? Your species conquered the galaxy by being stronger and more advanced than everyone you met. But you never encountered a species that learned to be smarter and more adaptive than everything trying to kill them. Humans don't build technology to show how advanced we are. We build it to solve immediate practical problems. And right now, our most immediate problem was how to convince a galactic empire to leave us alone. As his crippled fleet began its long journey back to Confederation space, Krexville found himself wondering what other surprises humanity might be hiding. If this was what they could accomplish in 18 months when properly motivated, what might they achieve given a decade, a century? The thought sent chills through his exoskeleton. Admiral Chen's final transmission reached his ship just as they cleared the outer edge of the human system. Give our regards to your high command, Battle Marshal. And tell them that if they decide they need Earth's resources badly enough to try again, we'll be happy to show them what we've been building since you arrived. The communication channel closed, leaving Krexville alone with his thoughts and the impossible task of explaining to his superiors how humanity had just rewritten the rules of galactic warfare. Behind them, the blue-green world continued its peaceful rotation, giving no hint of the technological marvels hidden throughout the system, or the species that had just announced their arrival on the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. The emergency session of the Confederation High Council convened in absolute secrecy. 3 rotations after Battle Marshal Krexville's humiliated fleet limped back to civilized space. Representatives from 47,000 star systems gathered in the crystalline amphitheater of the Nexus station, their faces bearing expressions ranging from disbelief to barely contained panic. High Admiral Vexnar stood before the assembled council, his scaled features betraying none of the turmoil that had consumed him since reading Krexville's report. In 4 centuries of military service, he had never encountered anything that challenged his fundamental understanding of how warfare functioned in the galaxy. Council members, he began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. We face an unprecedented situation. A primitive species has not only repelled our elite guard, but has demonstrated technological capabilities that exceed our own in several critical areas. A ripple of murmurs swept through the assembled representatives. The Zefkari delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, pulsed with agitated colors. Impossible. The creature communicated through harmonic frequencies. Our sensors confirmed their primitive status. Chemical rockets, fusion weapons, electromagnetic communications. They barely qualified as spacefaring. That assessment was clearly incomplete, Vexnar replied grimly. Baffled Marshal Krexvol's testimony, supported by sensor logs from every ship in his fleet, confirms that humanity possesses advanced temporal manipulation technology, artificial gravity control beyond our theoretical models, and exotic matter production capabilities that suggest mastery of physics we're only beginning to understand. The Morton Council representative, a massive beetle-like being whose species had been among the Confederation's founding members, clicked its mandibles in agitation. If this species possesses such advanced capabilities, why did they appear primitive during initial contact? Because, Vexnar said, calling up holographic displays of the human trap that had captured their fleet, they allowed us to see exactly what they wanted us to see. Every aspect of their technology that we observed was carefully curated to present an image of manageable primitiveness while concealing their true capabilities. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If humanity could deceive Confederation sensors so thoroughly, how many other species might be hiding their true nature? How many potential threats had they missed during their expansion across the galaxy? Councillor Jexra of the ruling Dominarch caste rose from her position at the center of the amphitheater. Standing nearly 4 meters tall, with natural armor plating that had turned aside assassin's blades for 3 millennia, she represented everything the Confederation valued: strength, durability, and absolute confidence in their superiority. "Admiral," she said, her voice carrying the authority of unchallenged power, "explain how a single primitive world defeated our most elite forces." Vexnar activated the tactical displays, showing the step-by-step breakdown of humanity's trap. "They didn't defeat us in conventional terms, Counselor. They rendered conventional warfare irrelevant. By controlling space-time itself, they negated every advantage our superior firepower provided. Then we deploy superior forces," Jexra declared. "Mobilize the entire First Fleet. 50,000 ships should suffice to overwhelm whatever tricks these humans possess." "With respect, Counselor, I believe that would be a catastrophic mistake." The chamber fell silent. In the Confederation's entire history, no military officer had ever contradicted a direct order from the Dominarch Council. Vexner felt every eye in the amphitheater focused on him, but he continued speaking despite the weight of their attention. "Humanity demonstrated the ability to capture and analyze our entire elite guard fleet in a matter of hours. Every piece of technology we possess is now in their databases. They understand our capabilities better than we understand theirs. Sending a larger force would simply provide them with more advanced systems to study and reverse engineer." Councillor Jexra's armor plates shifted, a sign of barely controlled rage. "Are you suggesting we cannot defeat a single primitive world?" "I'm suggesting that we redefine our understanding of what primitive means in this context," Vexnar replied carefully. "Humanity's technology follows development patterns unlike anything in our experience. They appear to advance through sudden revolutionary leaps rather than gradual evolutionary progress." He called up new displays showing the analysis of human technological artifacts recovered from their own ships after the encounter. "Our science division has spent the past 3 rotations studying the systems they used to penetrate our networks. The computational architecture is unlike anything we've seen. Instead of building more powerful processors, they've learned to make existing processors think more efficiently. Their exotic matter manipulation doesn't rely on brute force energy generation, but on precise spatial manipulation that requires a fraction of the power our methods would need." The scientific implications were staggering, but Vexnar knew the Council was more interested in practical concerns. "More importantly," he continued, "our analysis of their temporal displacement technology suggests they can extend their time manipulation capabilities far beyond defensive applications. In theory, they could accelerate their own development by decades while their enemies experience only days." The chamber erupted in alarmed discussions as the representatives grasped the full scope of what they faced. A species that could manipulate time itself was not just a military threat. It represented a complete upset of the natural order that had governed galactic civilization for millennia. Councillor Jexra raised her hand for silence, and the chamber immediately complied. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" Vexnar had spent 3 sleepless rotations preparing for this moment. knowing his answer would likely end his career and possibly his life. Immediate diplomatic contact. We offer humanity full membership in the Confederation as equals, with all the rights and privileges thereof. The suggestion hit the council like antimatter detonation. Voices rose in outrage, several representatives leaping from their seats to voice protests. The very idea of offering equality to a species that hadn't earned it through conquest or submission violated everything the Confederation represented. Unthinkable, roared the HFY representative. Our civilization spans 47,000 systems. We do not negotiate with primitives. They're not primitives, Vexnar said quietly, and something in his tone cut through the chaos. That's what we need to understand. Humanity represents a completely different approach to technological and social development. They've achieved capabilities we can't match while maintaining a social structure that encourages individual innovation rather than centralized control. He activated new displays showing comparative analysis between human and Confederation civilizations. Our expansion succeeded because we encountered species that developed in isolation on single worlds with limited resources and predictable challenges. We became experts at conquering civilizations that learned cooperation to survive. Humanity evolved on a world where cooperation was just the beginning. They learned to compete with their environment, their predators, their climate, and eventually each other, all while maintaining the social bonds necessary for their species' survival. They developed technology not to demonstrate superiority but to solve immediate practical problems that threatened their existence. The analysis painted a picture that challenged every assumption the Confederation held about technological development and military superiority. Furthermore, Vexnar continued, humanity's response to our first contact suggests they've been preparing for galactic contact for much longer than we realized. Their trap wasn't improvised. It was a carefully planned defensive system designed specifically to counter technologically superior forces. Councillor Jexra's expression had grown increasingly grim as she absorbed the implications of his analysis. You believe they pose a genuine threat to Confederation security? I believe they pose a threat to Confederation existence, Vexnar replied bluntly. If we continue treating them as enemies, they'll eventually develop the capability to challenge our entire civilization. But if we approach them as potential allies, we might benefit from their unique perspective on technology and strategy. Before the Council could respond, the Chamber's emergency alert systems activated. The crystalline walls flashed with urgent warnings as automated systems detected an impossible energy signature approaching the Nexus station. Report, Councillor Jexra commanded. The station's sensor operator, a Vexthali whose species specialized in long-range detection, worked frantically at his console. Counselor, we're detecting a single vessel approaching at impossible velocities. It's not using hyperspace or any known faster-than-light travel method, but it's covering distances that should take days in a matter of minutes. Classification? Unknown, Counselor. The vessel's signature doesn't match any known design. Energy output is minimal. Whatever propulsion system it's using operates at near-perfect efficiency. Vexnar felt his blood temperature drop several degrees. Distance to intercept? At current velocity, approximately 6 minutes until arrival. The High Admiral activated his personal communication system, sending priority alerts to every Confederation fleet within 50 light years. If humanity had come to deliver their own ultimatum, he wanted every available ship converging on the Nexus station. Counselor, he said, turning back to Jexra, I strongly recommend we evacuate the station immediately. We do not flee from single ships, she replied, though her armor plates had begun shifting to combat configuration. If humanity wishes to negotiate, they can do so through proper diplomatic channels. The unidentified vessel dropped out of whatever impossible drive system it used, exactly 1,000 kilometers from the Nexus station, close enough to demonstrate their precise control, far enough to avoid appearing immediately threatening. As the Confederation sensors focused on the craft, details began to resolve on the main display. The ship was beautiful in its simplicity. Where Confederation vessels emphasized intimidation through massive size and visible weapon systems, the human craft appeared almost organic. Its hull curved in smooth lines that suggested efficiency rather than aggression, and its energy signature remained so low that it barely registered on their instruments. Incoming communication, the station operator reported. On screen, Councillor Jexra ordered. The figure that appeared on the main display was recognizably human but somehow different from Admiral Chen. This woman appeared younger, with the kind of calm confidence that comes from absolute certainty in one's abilities. When she spoke, her words carried across the chamber with perfect clarity despite the universal translator. Good afternoon, Council members. I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, representing humanity's Department of External Relations. I understand you've been having some difficulty deciding how to respond to our previous communications. The casual tone sent ripples of shock through the assembled representatives. No one addressed the Confederation High Council with such informality and lived to regret it. I am Councillor Jexra of the Dominarch Council, Jexra replied, her voice carrying all the authority of her position. You will observe proper diplomatic protocols when addressing this assembly. Dr. Vasquez smiled, and something about the expression reminded Vexnar uncomfortably of Admiral Chen's predatory grin. Councillor, I appreciate your position, but I'm afraid we're operating under different assumptions about who holds authority in this conversation. You see, humanity has spent the past several rotations analyzing the data we acquired from your elite guard fleet, and we've learned some very interesting things about your civilization. She paused, apparently touching something off-screen, and new displays materialized throughout the council chamber, displays that should have been impossible given the Nexus Station's security systems. For instance, we've discovered that your expansion across the galaxy has been built on a fundamental lie. You present yourselves as a unified confederation of equal members, but your own internal documents show that fewer than 24 species actually hold any real power. The rest are essentially elaborate slave states providing resources and labor for your ruling castes. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives realized their most classified information was being broadcast openly. Security forces moved toward their stations, but found their weapons systems mysteriously offline. More interestingly, Dr. Vasquez continued, apparently unperturbed by the commotion, we've identified significant structural weaknesses in your civilization's foundation. Your entire economy depends on the continued subjugation of primitive species, and your military maintains its effectiveness only through technological superiority over less advanced opponents. Councillor Jexra's armor plates had fully extended, giving her the appearance of an enraged predator ready to strike. You dare to lecture us about our own civilization? We have maintained order across the galaxy for 10,000 years. You've maintained control. Dr. Vasquez corrected. That's not the same thing as order, and control based on lies and oppression has a nasty tendency to collapse when subjected to external pressure. Quote, 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 she gestured, and new displays showed detailed analysis of Confederation military capabilities, economic systems, and social structures. Every weakness, every potential failure point, every hidden instability was laid bare with surgical precision. You see, Councillor, while you were debating how to respond to humanity's refusal to join your empire, we were conducting a comprehensive audit of your entire civilization. We know which systems are on the verge of rebellion, which species have been secretly developing advanced weapons, which economic sectors are approaching collapse, and which military commanders have been questioning their orders. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. If humanity possessed such detailed knowledge of Confederation weaknesses, they could potentially orchestrate the Empire's destruction without firing a shot. What do you want? Vexnar asked, knowing he was probably exceeding his authority but desperate to understand humanity's intentions. What we've always wanted, Admiral, to be left alone to develop in peace. Unfortunately, your Confederation's fundamental structure makes that impossible. You can't allow an independent human civilization to exist because it would serve as an example to your subjugated species. They might start wondering why they accepted your rule in the first place. Dr. Vasquez's expression grew more serious, though her tone remained conversational. So humanity has decided to solve the problem at its source. We're going to give the galaxy's oppressed species the tools they need to free themselves. You would destroy galactic civilization? Councillor Jexra demanded. We would liberate galactic civilization from those who've been controlling it through fear and deception. There's a difference. The displays changed again, showing shipping manifests, communication logs, and transfer records that painted a picture of massive covert operations already in progress. For the past several rotations, human agents have been making contact with species throughout your empire. We've shared our technological innovations with those who desire freedom, provided logistical support for independence movements, and offered protection to any civilization brave enough to declare their sovereignty. The scope of humanity's operations became clear as the data continued flowing across the displays. In months, they had accomplished what should have taken decades, the systematic undermining of Confederation authority throughout the galaxy. More importantly, Dr. Vasquez continued, we've provided these species with something your empire never could: hope. Hope that they don't have to accept domination as their natural state. Hope that cooperation between equals is possible. Hope that the galaxy can be better than what you've made it. Vexnar realized with growing horror that humanity hadn't just defeated the Confederation militarily, they had outmaneuvered them politically, economically, and ideologically. While the Council debated responses to a single human world, humanity had been orchestrating a galaxy-wide revolution. "You cannot succeed," Councillor Jextra said, though her voice lacked its previous certainty. "The Confederation has maintained order for millennia. Our systems are stable, our military is supreme, our authority is absolute."
Your authority, Doctor?
Vasquez replied, "Extends exactly as far as your ability to enforce it through violence. And violence only works as long as your victims believe you're stronger than they are." The final display showed real-time communications from across the galaxy, dozens of star systems declaring independence from Confederation rule, hundreds of species announcing their intention to form new cooperative alliances, thousands of worlds simply ceasing to respond to Confederation communications. In the span of a single conversation, the Confederation High Council was watching their empire crumble around them. "This is impossible," Jexa whispered. "No single species could coordinate such a massive operation. No single species following your model of centralized control could manage it," Dr. Vasquez agreed. "But humanity learned long ago that the best way to accomplish impossible things is to convince everyone involved that they're actually doing something easy. We didn't coordinate a galaxy-wide revolution, Counselor. We simply provided information and resources to species that were already ready to rebel. They organized themselves, made their own plans, and chose their own timing. We just made sure they knew they weren't alone." The elegant simplicity of humanity's approach was as terrifying as its effectiveness. Instead of conquering the galaxy themselves, they had taught the galaxy how to conquer its conquerors. "What happens now?" Vexnar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Now, Admiral, the galaxy learns what happens when civilizations are allowed to develop naturally, instead of being forced into artificial hierarchies. Some will thrive, others will struggle, and a few might even fail spectacularly. But they'll do it as free beings making their own choices rather than as slaves following someone else's orders." Vasquez stood, preparing to end the transmission. "As for the Confederation, you're welcome to continue existing as long as you limit yourselves to systems that actually want to be part of your empire. We estimate that somewhere between 12 and 15 star systems, mostly populated by your founding species. Consider it a retirement package. You can spend your remaining years reminiscing about the good old days when you ruled the galaxy, while the rest of us get on with the business of building something better." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. In less than an hour, humanity had effectively ended an empire that had dominated the galaxy for 10,000 years. High Admiral Vaxner stared at the blank display where Dr. Vasquez had been moments before. In all his years of military service, he had never encountered an enemy who fought by making enemies unnecessary. As alarms continued sounding throughout the Nexus station and reports poured in of more systems declaring independence, Vexnar found himself wondering if humanity's revolution might actually create the better galaxy they promised. He supposed, given the alternatives he was about to find out. In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, there exists a simple truth that every species learns eventually. Never underestimate the prey that refuses to run. For millennia, the Galactic Confederation had maintained order through fear and superior technology. When a primitive species called humanity dared to venture beyond their small blue world, the Council of 12 saw nothing more than another conquest waiting to happen. They had crushed thousands of civilizations before. What could possibly make these bipedal mammals different? The answer would come written in the wreckage of their greatest fleets, in the silence that followed where once their champions had spoken, and in the growing realization that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one you never see coming. This is the story of how humanity earned its place among the stars, not through diplomacy or submission, but by showing the galaxy what happens when you corner an animal that has spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things bigger than itself. Captain Zex Hara of the Confederation scout ship Infinite Reach had discovered over 40 new species during her 3-century career. Most were primitive, barely having mastered fire or basic agriculture. A few had achieved spaceflight within their home systems. None had ever posed even the slightest threat to the Confederation's expanding dominion. The blue-green world rotating slowly on her main viewer seemed no different from countless others. Standard oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, abundant water, diverse ecosystems, all the hallmarks of a world that bred soft, comfortable species. Her bioscanners detected the usual signs of primitive civilization: electromagnetic emissions, chemical propulsion systems, and the telltale signature of nuclear fission. They had reached that awkward adolescent stage of technological development where they could split atoms but hadn't yet learned to properly harness antimatter. "Preliminary scans complete, Captain," reported her science officer, a tall, crystalline being whose species had joined the Confederation after a brief, one-sided war 2 millennia ago. The dominant species appears to be carbon-based bipeds, tool users, obviously. They've achieved orbital flight and have established several primitive outposts on their system's fourth planet. Zexhara's 4 eyes studied the data streaming across her console. The species called themselves humans according to the linguistic analysis of their communication broadcasts. They seemed unremarkable in every way. No natural weapons, no enhanced physical capabilities, no psychic abilities. If anything, they appeared to be one of the more fragile species she'd encountered. "Any signs of advanced defensive capabilities?" she asked, though it was merely protocol. Species this primitive rarely possessed anything that could threaten a Confederation vessel. "Negative, Captain. Their most advanced weapons appear to be fusion-based missiles and kinetic projectiles. Primitive energy weapons in early development phases. Nothing that could penetrate even basic shielding." Zexhara nodded with satisfaction. Another easy acquisition for the Confederation. These humans would make adequate servants once properly conditioned. Their dexterity might prove useful in manufacturing sectors, and their apparent creativity could be channeled towards solving minor engineering problems for their betters. She activated the long-range communication array and transmitted the standard first contact message on multiple frequencies. The translation matrix would convert her words into the humans' primitive languages automatically. "Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet. I am Captain Zexhara of the Galactic Confederation. Your species has been observed and evaluated. You will prepare for integration into our civilization. Comply, and your transition to service will be painless. Resist, and you will be pacified through necessary force." The response came faster than expected. Most species took several rotations to properly comprehend the magnitude of what they faced. The voice that answered spoke in clear, measured tones through the universal translator. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen, representing Earth's United Defense Command. We thank you for making contact, but we must respectfully decline your offer of integration. Earth claims sovereignty over this system and requests that you respect our territorial boundaries."
Zexhara's mandibles clicked in amusement.
Such bravado from a species that had barely escaped their own gravity well. It was almost endearing in its futility. "Admiral Chen," she replied, making no effort to hide her condescension, "I don't believe you understand the situation. The Confederation encompasses 47,000 star systems. We possess technology beyond your comprehension and military forces numbering in the billions. Your resistance is neither possible nor advisable." There was a pause before the human responded. When Admiral Chen spoke again, her tone remained calm, almost conversational. "Captain, I believe you're the one who doesn't understand the situation. Humanity has never been particularly good at following orders, especially from uninvited guests. I suggest you return to wherever you came from and inform your superiors that Earth is not interested in whatever you're selling."
The sheer audacity left Zexhara momentarily speechless.
In 3 centuries of first contact scenarios, no primitive species had ever shown such brazen disrespect to a Confederation representative. Most groveled for mercy within minutes of learning what they faced.
"Very well, Admiral," Zexhara said, her voice hardening. "You have chosen the difficult path.
I will return with a proper subjugation fleet. I suggest you use the time wisely. Surrender will be the only option once they arrive." "Looking forward to it," came the human's reply, and the communication channel went dead. Zexhara stared at her console, her 4 eyes blinking in rapid sequence, a sign of deep contemplation among her people. No species had ever responded to first contact with such casual defiance. Were these humans too primitive to understand the threat they faced, or did they possess some hidden capability her scans had missed? She ordered a full tactical analysis as her ship began the journey back to Confederation space. Her sensors swept the system one final time, cataloging military installations, population centers, and industrial capacity. Everything appeared precisely as primitive as expected. The humans had perhaps 24 orbital platforms, a small fleet of chemical propulsion vessels, and ground-based weapons that wouldn't have troubled her grandmother's training ship. Yet something nagged at her consciousness as the blue world dwindled behind them. It was the tone in Admiral Chen's voice, Not the bluster of ignorance or the desperation of the doomed, but something else entirely. Confidence. As if the human possessed information that Zex Hara lacked. The journey to Confederation Central Command took 18 standard time units. During the transit, Zex Hara compiled her report, carefully documenting every detail of the encounter. She included full sensor logs, communication transcripts, and her tactical assessment. The humans were classified as a Class 7 threat. Minimal danger, suitable for standard subjugation protocols. High Admiral Vexnar received her report with the same casual interest he showed all primitive species evaluations. The towering reptilian being had overseen the integration of hundreds of species during his 4-century career. Humans would be nothing more than another entry in the vast catalogue of Confederation subjects. "Your recommendation, Captain?" he asked, his scaled fingers drumming against his command throne. "Standard pacification fleet should suffice, Admiral. Perhaps the 7th Battle Group. They haven't seen action in several cycles and could use the experience." Vexnar's lips curled in what passed for a smile among his kind. "No, Captain. This species showed unusual defiance. We'll make an example of them. Show the galaxy what happens to those who reject Confederation generosity." "Summon the Elite Guard." Zex Hara's eyes widened. The Elite Guard was the Confederation's premier military force, reserved for threats requiring maximum application of power. Using them against primitive humans seemed like swatting insects with a plasma cannon. "Admiral, surely the Elite Guard is excessive for such a primitive species."
Primitive, yes. But primitive species don't typically respond to first contact with casual dismissal.
Either these humans are too ignorant to understand the situation, or they know something we don't. In either case, we'll crush them so thoroughly that no other species will dare such insolence. Within 7 rotations, the most feared battle fleet in galactic history assembled in the void beyond human space. 200 ships of the line, each one capable of reducing a planet to molten slag. The flagship Endless Dominion stretched nearly 10 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull bristling with weapons that could shatter moons. Aboard the fleet were the Confederation's most elite warriors, the Zenthari Berserkers, whose very name caused civilizations to surrender without firing a shot. Battle Marshal Krexval stood on the bridge of the Endless Dominion, studying tactical displays of the human system. His species had been bred for war across 1,000 generations, each individual standing 3 meters tall with natural armor plating and reflexes enhanced through genetic manipulation. He had personally led the conquest of 43 species and had never tasted defeat. "Analysis confirms the primitive nature of their defenses," reported his tactical officer. "Our preliminary bombardment should eliminate all orbital installations within the first few minutes. Ground pacification estimated at no more than 7 rotations." Krexisvol nodded, though something in the back of his mind whispered caution. The human's casual dismissal of Confederation power troubled him in ways he couldn't articulate. In his experience, such confidence usually indicated hidden strength or desperate madness. He hoped, for their sake, it was merely the latter. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the human system in perfect formation, their arrival calculated to maximize psychological impact. Energy signatures that powerful should have caused immediate panic among any sentient species capable of detection. Instead, they were met with silence. No frantic communications, no desperate pleas for mercy, no hasty evacuation attempts. The human orbital installations maintained their standard traffic patterns as if a fleet capable of sterilizing their entire system hadn't just materialized on their doorstep. "Open a channel to the planet's leadership," Krexval ordered. "Let's see if they're more reasonable than their representative suggested." The same human admiral appeared on his display, apparently seated in some kind of command center. She looked older than during the first contact, but her expression remained maddeningly calm. "Admiral Chen." Krexval began, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. "I am Battle Marshal Krexval of the Confederation Elite Guard. You see before you 200 warships, each one capable of destroying your entire civilization. I offer you one final opportunity to surrender. Comply, and your species will serve the Confederation. Refuse, and your world will burn." Admiral Chen leaned back in her chair, seemingly studying something off-camera before returning her attention to him. "Battle Marshal, I appreciate the impressive display. 200 ships is certainly more than we expected for our little backwater system. However, our position remains unchanged. We respectfully decline your offer and request that you leave our space immediately." The sheer impossibility of the response left Krexval momentarily stunned. He had expected fear, desperation, perhaps even defiant bravado masking terror. What he saw instead was a human calmly refusing his ultimatum as if she held equivalent power. Admiral, perhaps you don't understand the weapons pointed at your world. Each of my ships carries enough firepower to level your continents. Together, we could render your planet uninhabitable for the next million cycles. I understand perfectly, Battle Marshal. The question is whether you understand what you're really facing here. For the first time in his career, Krexvoll felt a chill of uncertainty. There was something in the human's tone, a quiet confidence that spoke of hidden cards yet to be played. Elaborate, he demanded. Admiral Chen's expression shifted slightly, the diplomatic mask falling away to reveal something harder underneath. You've spent your entire expansion cataloging species that evolved on single worlds, Battle Marshal. Species that developed in isolation, that never had to compete with anything more dangerous than local predators. You've grown accustomed to easy victories over civilizations that learned cooperation to survive. But here's what your scans couldn't detect. Humanity didn't evolve in isolation. We evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, climate changes that wiped out entire continents. And we didn't just survive, we thrived. We learned to kill things bigger and stronger and faster than ourselves, because that was the only way to see another sunrise. More importantly, we learned something your peaceful conquests never taught you: how to fight dirty. Krexvoll's tactical displays suddenly erupted in warning symbols. His sensor operators frantically worked their controls, their voices rising in barely controlled panic. Battle Marshal, we're detecting massive power signatures throughout the system. Energy sources we didn't register before are coming online. Impossible. Our scans showed no technology capable of threatening this fleet. Admiral Chen's image smiled, and for the first time, Krexvoll saw something that made his blood run cold. A predator showing its teeth. That's because you were looking for energy weapons and shield generators, and all the other toys civilized species use to fight clean wars. You weren't looking for what humans actually build when someone threatens our home. The tactical display painted a picture that violated everything Krexvoll thought he knew about primitive civilizations. Hidden installations throughout the system were powering up, revealing themselves for the first time. But these weren't conventional weapons or defensive systems. They were traps. The first indication that Battle Marshal Krexvoll had gravely underestimated humanity came in the form of his flagship's proximity alarms. They sent the best in the stars against humans. None came back. HFY sci-fi.